in my standard operational procedure, I said I wasn't going to build one set from this lot. But it was just so tempting. It was so, I mean, seriously, the pieces were there. Okay, not even half the pieces were there. So I had to grab 9 pieces from my collection. And that's not even including the minifig. Remember, I only had the air tanks. So 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces from the minifig and the walkie-talkie. So 5. So 9 plus 5, 14 pieces I had to grab from my collection to build this guy. But this guy's built now. So it is. I'm gonna say this is one of the better original. Well, not original, but the second tier of the classic base sets. It's a cute little set, and I remember it just being ubiquitous on the store shelves back in the day, and I didn't buy one, which is a shock to the shock. It didn't have wheels. It had these jets in the bottom. I mean, I did a review on it, so you can go look at the review. But the grabber on the back, fantastic. The rocket thrusters in the bottom, fantastic. The trans red came with 4 of them, fantastic. The thrusters, fantastic. Now, I'm not a designer. I'm not a Lego designer, but I think this is what they're going to have, because normally all the other classic space set vehicles are all gray, basically all gray. They put some black back here. I think it was just going to be too gray if these pieces were black. That's my best guess. Again, I never got the chance to talk to the guy why he put the black on here instead of the gray. Also, because other sets were being released at this time with gray ones. So I don't know. Maybe they just had many blacks. Many black pieces. So built it. Happy I built it. It's a nice set. The one thing that I always note is that in the instructions, and I didn't go through all of them, but in almost all the instructions that you find for classic space sets, the walkie-talkie, if there's a walkie-talkie in the instructions, it's in the other hand. But then the guy's talking to the studs. And I always like the guy talking to those the grates, the horizontal lines in there, because that's when I have a walkie-talkie. Although, again, old army walkie-talkies had these guys, the earpiece and the talking, and then these were the vents. Whatever. I always put it this way: studs out. It's just something I've always done. Anyway, so what's that number? Is this 6 something? 6821? No, 6822. Built another one. Just because I could. Now, what's left is these pieces here, and 2 tires, 1 wing plate, a bunch of 2x plates, some 1x plates, a rocket thruster, 4x4 radar dish, 2 2x2s, round bricks, a couple 1x2 with handles, that a hinge piece, another top of a hinge piece. I don't know. I can't think of it. Nothing jumps out at me right now as to what sets are in here. These could be any set. So I'm just gonna roll these into the collection just because I can. So I wanted to do something. I wanted to build something tonight. I'm actually thinking about duplicating my vehicle for the layout, because this is my standard utility truck for the layout. It's got the connection in the back. This is what hauls those portable lights around, which is pretty awesome, if I do say so myself. I might give this another kick at the can to make something else, because I got these pieces sitting here, and light gray impresses me. So I might try to build yet another distinctly similar type of vehicle for the layout, because I like doing that. So I am building. I'm done sorting all the rest of the pieces. I'm just going to get that cut out of the picture because it detracts from the overall ambiance of my workstation. I am going to, I don't see anything off the top of my head up there that I can pull down, but I'm going to try to build another small vehicle. A quick tangent on that. Years ago, I think it was a hobby show that I was running. After Alan gave gave it over to me to run for the Lego part, I brought a lot of classic space light gray tires and fenders and plates and stuff. And I said, over the weekend, because we were there for 2.5 days, if you guys feel like trying to build something for a classic space layout, go ahead. Now, my buddy Jason Allerman built me something, which is really, really cool. I have it somewhere. I don't have it here, unfortunately, in my hand. But it was a kind of a micro spaceship, which is really, really nice because he just kind of put a whole bunch of classic space light gray pieces together, and it looked really, really cool because Jason is one of my favorite builders. I kept it, so you can't remember where it is right now because I didn't bother bringing it to other shows because it didn't. Again, I don't want to be nitpicky or whatever, but I had this conversation when I did the Brick World Chicago. There's a scale to the layout. There's a scale to this layout. This layout was meant overall for 1978 to 1985 classic space, and the blue-gray classic space, not the white, blue, trans dark blue, not the other colors, but just the trans yellow, blue, and gray, and the gray vehicles that came out in the early 70s. This was in my, not this exact one, I mentioned not those stories, I'm not going to go into those again, but this layout was in my head since I was 11, and it's to that scale, because you can see this is one of the bigger vehicles, and it's the one that carries the shuttle around with the big tires, but it's still the 2x2 gray plate with axle. And of course, my take on the 918, and over here, you can see the back end of Jeff's Megacore magnetizer done in classic space colors. But see, here's this vehicle here. It's my little pickup truck vehicle. Fantastic. But even Jeff's Megacore magnetizer, which was in the layout for the longest time, not this layout with the tower, but it was in the ad hoc layouts that we did at the beginning, because we had huge buildings and we had huge vehicles, and we had huge spaceships and little tiny dinky spaceships and little tiny classic spaceships. But when I started getting to the point where the tower's there and the air station's there and blah, 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 I wanted to keep a consistent theme and feel to it. And so I settled on my original, which is the 2x2 plate with tires, small or big, doesn't matter because the big ones are fine too. But overall, most of them are small. And so Ian Green had a gorgeous spaceship, an absolutely gorgeous spaceship. And when we were at Brick World Chicago, we needed a place to put it. And so on my layout, I had 4 or 5 road plates in a row, or landing pads in a row, and he basically plopped the spaceship on there. And the spaceship took up 4 or 5 base and hung over this wider than 32 studs. And it looked out of place on the layout. But that was a place to put it, and it was a show, and I didn't care at the time. But what I'm trying to do is maintain a consistent feel. And I even noticed one of my favorite sets ever is the rocket launcher 6950, I think it is. The rocket launcher is one of my most absolute favorite sets ever. It's absolutely a perfect set, and a lot of people took that set and ran with it and made it bigger, better, cuter, whatever. It's one of those coveted sets that people want, and a lot of people paid their own homage to it by making it their way. And it's a gorgeous set, but in my opinion, in the context of my layout as it is right now, it's out of scale. No, it's a minifig scale because minifigs are in it, but it's out of scale to be in the layout because it can't even fit underneath the monorails. And the monorails from the base plate to the monorail level is 12 studs, and it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit underneath the monorail. So how can it get out? So, like if the layout was bigger and there was a lot of space for space, which I always like space for space. Like it used to be when Jeff and I used to do those ad hoc layouts where he just kept on throwing out base plates and then dropping stuff on base plates. That's perfect. That's honestly perfect because you can just throw a bunch of 6950s out there. I did that for a few layouts because I have a few 6950s to throw out there, and it'll look fine. It honestly looks, because the thing's across 7 tables. You don't. It doesn't look huge, and 7 tables by I would say 9 base plates by 20 base plates. Or more than that, because it's 3, 6, 9, 12. Yeah, about 21 base plates. A 6950 doesn't look out of scale when it's the layout itself is that big. It's like the Megacore magnetizer doesn't look that big when it's in a layout that's big. But when your base plates are 6x9, and basically the rocket launcher takes up an entire base plate on its own, it looks out of place. Now, people would say, but the Galaxy Explorer takes up a base plate too. Yeah, it takes up a landing pad. And it does take up a landing pad. It takes up the entire landing pad. But in the end, it's a landing pad for a spaceship. It's not like the Megacore, the 6950 doesn't fit on the roadways. It's 8 wide, more than 8 wide. So it's nuance, I would say. It's me being nuancic, if that's a word. Where I've always said, and I still say, and I will always say, we did this at a couple of brick fets where people would say, "Hey, Dave, I want to put my mock in your layout for the show," and I said, not a problem, because I'm not gonna say no to people to put their mock in my show and my layout, especially when they're just so enthusiastic and they've worked hard at it and whatever. But I do notice when something looks out of scale for the layout. And again, as I say, back in the day when Jeff and I were doing a collab and we just threw out base plates, bring a spaceship that's 20, like an actual ship over 100 tons, because it wouldn't matter. But in my 3x2 or 6 base plates by 9 base plates, it does matter, because there's not a lot of space in that layout. And so these guys are perfect, right? Because they're to scale. Now, again, you look at this little tiny vehicle and you look at the huge tower behind it. Yeah, it was. It's what it is. But and I would also say, and again, this has happened in the past when we did that 10 foot by 18 foot layout, that you could fit a lot of stuff on there. We did fit a lot of stuff on there. It looked empty because I didn't bring enough to fit on there. And that's when absolutely throw whatever you want on there, because you got to fill up the space. But right now, in order to maintain, for me, the consistency and the feel of the layout, I am a little more picky as to what is in the layout. And it's this kind of scale. And this kind of scale, and not much bigger than the shuttle carrying vehicle with the big tires on it. Not much bigger than that for a vehicle in the layout, because it has to fit on the road plates in its lane, and anything bigger just looks out of scale. And again, the exception is the spaceships, because gotta have spaceships. And the Galaxy Explorer is the biggest spaceship in the layout. I think the Starfleet Voyager is longer, and I can't tell right now because I don't think I have a Starfleet Voyager here. I think on storage. I believe the Starfleet Voyager from stem to stern is longer than the Galaxy Explorer, but then the nose goes over to the edge and then tips down. It's kind of cute on a landing pad. So what I tend to do is I tend to build in this scale, and getting the minutiae into that kind of 4 wide by maybe maximum 10 studs long, trying to get it to look different than anything else, yet still fit into the layout so it looks like it came from the same factory. It's very tough. I built a pickup truck that was reasonable. I built this little power truck for a utility vehicle for moving around. It looks good. I've tried to build other things and it looks like like it's either too kitschy, or also when I build something, I want it to look like it's functional, like not some esoteric 1950s science fiction idea of what something's going to look like George Jetson's spaceship, which is like as esoterically futuristic, but does it actually look in reality like there's some sort of physics behind it, some sort of concept of reality behind it? And so I try not to do the George Jetson look. I try to do the, shall we say, the, what's that movie? The Martian with Matt Damon. Because, their rover looks like it's functional. Looks like you can build it right now. And it doesn't look esoterically stuff greebled just for the sake of greebling on it. It looks like it was meant to be there, like something we can build for exactly that. On another quick tangent, I heard, although no, I think I remember seeing pictures when the evolution of farming happens, because farming's been going on for tens of thousands of years now. But when the evolution of farming happened, that went from mules and oxen and horses doing the plowing or aiding in the farmer plowing to tractors, actual engined tractors, in the probably early 1900s, that the original tractors were released, some of them, I think I saw an advertisement somewhere, with a oxen head, not like a real one, but a fake one, either carved out of wood or whatever, on the front of the tractor, on the hood, on the bonnet, because they wanted it to feel like you're still using an ox, because they're transforming from ox into tractors. And that didn't last too long, because you're adding some sort of esoteric, non-functioning, that's going to cost more because you have to make it for the tractor. And why is it there? Tractors are 100% utilitarian, unless you go to a show. I grew up in farms, working on farms. Tractors are 100% utilitarian. Like 100%. There's no bells and whistles on tractors at all. At least the ones I drove when I was a kid. Now you get these $500,000 tractors with the 17 dualies on it and whatever. But back then, your little Massey Ferguson that I used to, or the Ford or whatever, International Harvester, and it was and the clutch it, and like there was nothing on that tractor that didn't have a function. Nothing at all was on that tractor that didn't have a function. Even the cowling was just so you didn't rip your hand off by walking around the engine, kind of thing. So, no, like it was like you're sitting on top of the transmission. There's nothing like the base of a tractor. If you ever look at it, if you ever really do look at it, the seat is bolted to the transmission. There's no frame. The frame is the engine and transmission. There's no frame to the tractor. like in a car, you have a frame, or a truck, you have a frame. The tractor, they built everything off of the engine and the transmission at the back. And so and I saw that when I was a kid. I said, it gets right, there's this bolt, and underneath the bolt are the gears that run the drivetrain out the back, or the tires on the side. There's no frame here. so utilitarian. And it was a 40-year-old tractor when I was driving it, so it was probably built in the 50s, the ones that I used to drive when I was a kid, 50s or 60s. It's changed now, but I would imagine still you can get a tractor that's completely 100% utilitarian. And so when I think about, quote unquote, my space layout, I think about now the Martian, but I made that layout before the Martian, but I think about the rover in the Martian. It looks 100% utilitarian. That's what it looks like to me. They didn't add any kind of greebling just for the sake of having greebles on it. And that's what I aspire for in the layout. Because even the original classic space sats, and again, let's grab this guy, as opposed to the new space sats. This thing is like look. If you start thinking about the physics, about how the spaceship works, if you want to go down that path, and the rocket thrusters and all the other stuff like the space shuttle, this thing looks like it's 100% or mostly utilitarian. There's no added greebles. There's no added stuff just to make it look more complicated than it actually is. And again, I love greebling. Still, I'm not disparaging greebling at all in spaceships, because I adore the greebling. When Aliens came out, and Master Antonio, whatever it was called, the Nemesis, I am forgetting names, but when that thing came by and it had all those little things up front, you can hypothesize that they're all used for something, communication or whatever, sensors, whatever. Or even Spaceballs. When that ship came overhead, and you see all the greebling. Battlestar Galactica, the original Galactica, that had so many doodads and doohickeys and all over. Like there wasn't a flat panel on the entire thing. When it's that big, sure, like absolutely. But when it's this small, like the Vipers, besides that part between the front of the engine, the white part, and then you see all the little black hoses and stuff, and then you get the white part with the orange stripe or red stripe on it. Utilitarian, because you look at a jet engine, it has like a tons of pipes and stuff on it. But so it wasn't greebled for the sake of being greebled. It looked like it was 100% valid. And so during the evolution of space sets, I remember on Lugnet following it since the early 2000s and late 1990s and 2000s, where greebling started catching on. There was those people that, again, my personal opinion, started building spaceships where the greebles looked like they were valid and sound on the spaceship, and then there's those people that just added a billion greebles on it, and it was like a hodgepodge of greebling. And so I always like function over form. That's how I've always been. Like, does it look like it's functioning? And I want to join this. Let's put it this way. I love going to visit people in their world. I love visiting their world. I love their fandom. Like I talked to my cousin Rick in his truck and all the other things that I've done in my life. Going to Anime North. I love visiting people in their world and just being overwhelmed with their enthusiasm for their world and living in it for a minute and appreciating their effort to enjoy their world, and whatever that world happens to be. And but I always bring my quote unquote rational, how can that work? Like there's magic and then there's science fiction reality. I read too many Asimov and Clarke books back in the day, where they talk about rockets and how rockets have to, turn, and you basically build momentum, and then halfway along the trip, and then you actually have to turn the rocket around and decelerate the second half of the trip, kind of thing. I love those stories from the 40s and 50s when they didn't have the idea, whatever. But then again, the space shuttle, like I was glued to the set with the space shuttle, and the same kind of concept where you have to take this from here and get it up to there and combat our gravity and blah blah, all that stuff. But I want it to be like, a lot of people thought the space shuttle itself didn't look cool enough. I thought it was the coolest looking thing on the planet because again, it's my era. I thought the space shuttle honestly was one of the best looking things ever that they've ever built on this planet. The original space shuttles, well, all of them look the same. The Columbia, the Endeavour, Atlantis, Challenger, and the all of them. I thought they were just absolutely beautiful looking spaceships, and they looked 100% functional, and obviously they were 100% functional. And so they didn't have the luxury of putting doodads and greebles on there just for the sake of having doodads and greebles. Everything on the space shuttle had to be 100% functional, as far as I know. Because a lot of science goes into it, and a lot of weight goes into it, and a lot of understanding goes into it, a lot of physics goes into it. And so you don't have the luxury of dropping a cow head on the front. Just because what function is that? Just to appease people that didn't want to transition from, blood and muscle working farms to steel and iron and diesel working farms. I wasn't alive back then, so I don't know exactly what they had to do to get people to buy tractors, but I do appreciate the esoteric. I love the esoteric. I love the thought of whatever, but I also love the idea that somebody somewhere who is designing some sort of world that's not our world that we're living in, but some sort of Babylon 5, Star Trek, whatever it is, some sort of world that they put some effort into justifying what they're building in that universe, that it should work in that universe. And the only thing that takes me really out of a movie or a TV show or a series or whatever is something that they've established this fact about this universe, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but they established this fact about this universe. One of the things I would say really, really quickly, at the original series, I don't think they ever stated that the fastest warp they could do was 9. 9.9, I think, was the established in the Next Generation as the fastest that anything could go physically in that universe using a warp engine. But there was that one episode, I think a few episodes, where the Enterprise was doing warp 15. And I'm going, no, the Enterprise cannot do warp 15. But that was the original series. They didn't have any kind of continuity, whatever, to get from one episode to the next episode. So I forgive little slips like that. Transwarp, sure, that's different warp kind of thing. The warp engines in the Next Generation, and then anyway, I'm not going to go on. That's how I got 2.5 hours that time. By the way, I started talking about this stuff. So I want to meet people in their world. I want to really ensconce myself into their world when I'm enthusiastic, if they're enthusiastic about it. For me and my, this is a Bible quote, for me and my house. As for me and my house, I try to build at this scale and this scale for my layout right now. Now I have, if you go back in my feed and know who I am, I built a 6.5, almost 7 foot ship for September one year. That was minifig scale. That could have been part of my layout, not in the layout, separate to the layout, because this thing is almost 7 feet long. It took up this entire desk. It's fantastic. I really loved building that, and I'm actually thinking about building something similar, but yet a lot smaller. I would not have put that ship in my layout. I would have had it separate to the layout in the same universe. It's again, not to borrow from Babylon 5, but the Explorer ship that visited Babylon 5 at least once. I can't remember if it came back twice. I think they said Ivanova went off on one when she left the series. But the Explorer ship, which was stupid long coming through the jump gate, but it was the ship itself was almost as long as Babylon 5 itself. Like, it was that big. I think Babylon 5 was like 5 miles long, if I remember correctly. So the Explorer ship was stupid long, but it was basically a lattice structure from beginning to end, with their habitat somewhere in the middle and the engines at the back. But it had a whole bunch of modules and whatever. Loved it, right? And so I met them where they are. And so this is what I love about universes that are created by JMS or Gene Roddenberry or George Lucas or whatever, that they build a universe and they try to at least maintain some sort of consistency, where if this fact is fact in one episode or one movie or whatever, that is the same in the next one or 10 years from now. And a lot of people got mad at Lucas, well, not mad at Lucas, but mad at episode 7, 8, 9, because you got Rey and Kylo communicating across vast distances, and then even now transporting lightsabers across the ether. Absolutely, it was not established before that couldn't happen. It wasn't established before that couldn't happen. The Jedi stuff, very, very, the nebulous, and what's the whole enchilada, they burned the books at the end. But whatever, burning books. Anyway, go on that. See, this is 2.5 hours. But I had no problem with Rey and Kylo swapping lightsabers like that. I had no problem with it, because it was never established that couldn't happen. And the healing, never established that couldn't happen. Now, why they didn't do it in previous episodes, yeah, you can make that argument. You can absolutely make that argument. Why wouldn't you make that argument? But in the end, Warp 9.9 was established in the Next Generation. And so Kirk and crew going Warp 15 bothers me. Not that it's like I'm losing sleep over it, bothers me, because I can't even remember the episode now. Return of the Kelvins, by any other, it may have been by any other name, which is honestly one of my better episodes. A lot of people didn't like it, by any other name. Where again, so this is how I keep on going off in tangents. What I loved about the original series, and they sort of maintained a little bit of that in the next iterations of Star Trek, was the inference, the reference of mythology and history and whatever. Who Mourns for Adonis? Fantastic name for an episode. Absolutely fantastic. Whom Gods Destroy. One of my favorite names for any episode ever. City on the Edge of Forever. You just picture something before you even see the episode, but by any other name. And again, that is such an esoteric title for an episode. But then Kirk talks about the rose. And it's just like, I love, those are the episode titles I remember. Aaron and Mercy, fantastic name for an episode. Journey to Babel. Are you kidding? Journey to Babel, fantastic. And of course, that's a direct reference to Mark Leonard showing up as Sarek again. And Amanda Wyatt, if I remember that, I think that's the actress' name, who used to be in a lot of movies back in the 50s and whatever, shows up as Spock's mom. I don't know. Hey, world famous movie star, do you want to come and do a guest stint to be Spock's mom on Star Trek? How did Roddenberry pull that one off? and then they call her back for Star Trek 4. Oh, I was just and I wasn't expecting it. I will say this. So this is how we get the 2.5 hours. When I saw Star Trek 4, I saw it with my friend Sean. He worked at the Fiesta Mall movie theater. And down the street, and he got sneak passes for Star Trek 4 like a couple days before it was released to the public. And so he calls me up, Dave, I know you're a huge Star Trek fan, so let's go watch Star Trek 4. I'll take you there. And then so we go down to the Tivoli, which was still there. I will never ever get them dismantling the Tivoli, because I saw Star Wars there. I saw the first 4 Star Trek movies there. I saw a whole bunch of movies there, 70mm Dolby sound. It was just an experience to go to the Tivoli. The building was built in 1904 or before. It was an old vaudeville and whatever, old theater that they can afford. Anyway, that's a whole other tangent. So we go to there, and I was voracious, reading all the magazines. Star Trek 4 is coming out. And again, I am a Trekkie. I seen every original series episode. I don't know how many times. There are some I really, really want to watch over and over and over again. City on Edge Forever, Enterprise Incident, a lot, Private Little War, and some I will turn off the second I hear Spock's brain click. Although I did watch it 3 months ago, and I'm going, yeah, this. There are so many little redeeming qualities. Anyway, not going to talk about Spock's brain. So I'm in the movie theater. The credits are going by, and attacking the water and blah blah blah. Fantastic. The probe, the whales, whatever. But the scene back on Vulcan when Spock is relearning stuff, which they did in Star Trek, the reboot, with little Spock learning stuff, and they almost had word for word the same questions, which I thought was a great throwback to Star Trek 4 when little Spock, young Spock, was learning this stuff. But then, how do you feel shows up on the screen, and I thought just that line, honestly, it moved me. I was like, because the whole Spock not feeling and blah 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 and Vulcans whatever, how do you feel? And then you see her in the background. I love that stuff. And this is why, and no spoilers, this is why the last episode of Picard 3-6, season 3, episode 6, was possibly just for me, and I've said this on my Facebook, the most poignant episode in the history of the franchise for all the franchises. Like, we love our Easter eggs. We're fans. We love our Easter eggs. We love Lower Decks does a good billion of them for jokes and whatever, and I love it. I'm there for it. But I thought the homage to almost every single thing that had happened before that episode in Picard was factored into the actual story, and yet was a beautiful homage to the rest of the story of all the previous series overall, especially the TOS and TNG, DS9 and Voyager. but even they had a little clip into a little ship in the background for Enterprise. They didn't reference it directly. I think somebody heard Archer's music somewhere in there. I didn't hear it. But Seven's little story about Voyager, I was misty-eyed, straight up. Again, I don't want spoilers if you haven't seen it yet. I was misty-eyed. I honestly was. And of course, ship. Oh, man, I like, because I am with Jack Crusher. It's still, there's the other one. It's still to this day. It is hit and miss between this one and that one as my favorite on any given day. But there's no other one in the entire franchise that comes close to those two. No other one that comes close to this one, because this is my childhood and the 1 through 6 movies of the refit Enterprise. Nothing comes, and it's not because I'm a Star Trek fan and I go, oh, no, there's significance behind it. It's like my cousin Rick's truck. There's significance behind it. It's the work, the effort, the appreciation, the love, the whatever, and more than that for me is the understanding that I got. I'm not saying my morals, my outlook, my compass in life was set by Star Trek. I'm not saying that. My parents are my 99.9% biggest influence on how I see the world today, and how my sense of justice and my sense of appreciation, my sense of love and honor, integrity, blah blah, from my parents. Straight up. Because I know some people didn't have that, but I did. But Star Trek was a huge, and still remains today, a huge influence on my personal outlook on life. And this is why I will always, for me, I mean, I like Star Wars, but Star Wars is a nice, cute little, I will say, one of those Harlequin romance mystery books, whatever. It's fluff. And honestly, it's fluff compared to Star Trek. Not to get into that debate. I love Star Wars. Star Trek's the way of life. I've already talked too much. It's because I went off tangents. And again, this is how I got to 2.5 hours. And we're already at 37 minutes. I love the idea of having a consistent feel in whatever world you're designing or working in. If it's some sort of, like, besides the one that we live in, which is what it is, my beautiful spot, to have a consistent, get these things out of the way. There you go. Now they're consistent. I want a consistent feel to my layout. I want it to feel like there's a history there, that things happen for a purpose, that there's no esoteric, oh, you have to reach for understanding how that is. The tower itself, as I say, was an evolution from the beginnings, 2 stories to where it ended up to be like that. But when it got like that, I said, I'm comfortable. This is done. And again, I did not have this picture in mind when I started building just this bottom part. I had no idea how tall, how big, I had no concept. I had some ideas that I mentioned this in other videos of what I wanted in there, the landing pads from Empire Strikes Back. So if Star Wars does influence me, I mentioned that, and when I watched Empire Strikes Back when I was a kid in the Tivoli movie theater, not to bring that back up, hey, reference. But when I saw Empire Strikes Back and the Millennium Falcon landed and Luke Skywalker landed on those beautiful landing pads, and they had the little gangway, the walkway to get into the building, into the Cloud City itself, I said, Lucas just outdid himself. And then the remastered ones, when you're inside the station or inside the Cloud City, and they CGI'd the walls into windows so you could see outside, I loved it. There's a lot of pluses to the CGI additions to Star Wars. There's a lot of detriments too, like Han shot first. I'm a Han shot first guy. I didn't appreciate, because he's not perfect. He's a scoundrel. He was watching out for himself, and so the evolution. So let's get into that without trying to get 2.5 hours. I thought that was a step back for the character arc of who Han Solo is, going from the scoundrel who is just watching out for himself at all times and not giving a whit about what happens to other people, except for Chewie. It was him and Chewie against the universe. So he shot first because he could, just to get out of the situation that he was gonna be and then remastered to he shot because Greedo shot at him. And I'm going, that not ruined Star Wars, because nothing ruined Star Wars. Star Wars is great. That bothered me un petit, because that took away from his redemptive arc. It really did. Because if you're defending yourself, nothing's unjustified in a general sense, not in a nuanced sense, but in a general sense. If you're defending yourself, nothing is unjustified. So absolutely killed him. Absolutely. Greedo, you shoot at me, I'm going to shoot at you. I don't know what Lucas was trying to dumb it down, because I thought the original idea that Han was the scoundrel. Scoundrels are scoundrels, right? And then you see him progressing from, let's get out of here, kid. Slow this thing and go home, whatever. To from Guido to Empire Strikes Back, where where he has this conflict of emotions between going off and being his solo, Han Solo, going off and being solo again, versus his appreciation and love building for Leia and blah blah blah. Like that scene in Empire Strikes Back where they're in the hallway and there's angst between the two of them. The characters were evolving in front of our eyes, going from point A at the beginning of Star Wars, where this guy is just this cocky, hotshot space jockey who just cares about himself, and look at the money we're going to make off this, Chewie. We'll be able to pay off all our debts. The old guy does, he's going to pay us all. It's going to be great. We get to go off and live our scoundrel lives, right? To, I'm going to be buried underneath a whole bunch of ice because I want to support my friends and blah, blah, blah. And then Return of the Jedi, which for me is my favorite. A lot of people like Empire, but Return of the Jedi is my favorite because it brought everything together. I love you. I know. Are you kidding me? That's icing. That was honestly icing on the cake for me, where they got there from Star Wars to Return of the Jedi, the Leia, but just Han Solo himself, willing to die for his friends. He was willing to kill just to go just a situation. In Star Wars, he's going to kill somebody with no thought. He throws the money, sorry bartender, for the mess, and he walks out. No thought at all about killing somebody. The other guy's a bad guy too, so we don't care. But him, as this, it's like the redemptive arc in John Wayne in True Grit, right? There's a redemptive arc there. There really is. But I love redemptive arcs, and that's why the remastered, redigitaled version of Star Wars really, in that specific context, like I love the additional, I love the cleaning up, I love those outside of the Cloud City. I love all the little doodads that they put in there and all the fixings and whatever. And I also love the fact that Lucas himself didn't redo everything with CGI, like the computerized channel run that they used in the briefing in Star Wars. Right? So I think overall Lucas did a fantastic job updating his movies, but I think there are certain things that he should have left alone. And it's the same thing. I saw this on the TikToks the other day about the CGI version of all the original series episodes. And again, I've seen them all in the CGI version. And somebody made the point that you cannot say that the CGI version looks more cartoonish than the original version. You can't say that. The Enterprises fly by, the details on the first Constitution ship there. You can't say that. But in my own opinion, when I'm watching Doomsday Machine, fantastic name, like it is. When I'm watching Doomsday Machine, and you see again, this is me being 5 years old again, you see the Doomsday Machine and the Constellation had to be updated. Was it Constellation? I forget Decker's ship now. That's kind of sad. I think it was the Constellation. Decker ship with a bent nacelle and you know the scuffs up on it, where you can see that they just took the AMT kit and they melted it a little bit. Right? So this is fine. So the CGI version of the Decker ship looked much better, but I would say that the actual Doomsday machine itself looked much better in the original than it did in CGI. And how do you even like quantify that? So how do you like separate these special effects have to be 1967 special effects, and these special effects over here have to be the latest greatest CGI. Now, I like that they updated all the Star Trek episodes, original Star Trek episodes. I hear, and again, I don't know if they've done this successfully or they're doing it, is that they're going to do TNG to 4K, which would be great because there are some really solid episodes in TNG that I would love to see in 4K, because TNG, again, on any given day, is my favorite franchise in Star Trek. And any other given day, it's TOS. So they're neck and neck. And again, it depends on how I'm feeling that day. If I feel like watching Equality of Mercy, which is just a brilliant episode, or if I feel like watching Relics, of course, or Inner Light, of course, or Best of Both Worlds, of course. I don't remember too many of the names of TNG. The Message, fantastic. I can't remember names, but I know all the plots for every episode of TNG. But the original series, I could probably write down on a piece of paper at least half the names of the 79 episodes and tell you the plot, because I watched it so many times. Arena, it don't get better and more campier, but it doesn't get better. Unfortunately, that's where William Shatner got his tinnitus from. But Arena is, I guess, as I said before, is one of the very first episodes I remember watching as a kid. I've watched. My brother even told me this. I watched with him a lot of Star Trek before that, but I remember today, thinking back to my very first episode, it was Arena that I remember, and then Return of the Vectrons. I remember that was one of the episodes I saw soon after that one. But the Gorn, yeah, absolutely 100% campy. Absolutely campy. But the idea, like, you're 5 years old laying on the floor and you're scared for Kirk because he's got this big, huge lizard creature that you can't kill running after him. And it's like, yeah, the canon, sure, absolutely perfect. So it's like, it's fun. And again, this is what I love about Star Trek. Is Strange New Worlds, the Gorns are so far the biggest enemy that they have. Perfect. And of course, the Gorns look nothing like the original. They're mean and vicious and CGI'd, and they will eat anything and kill anything. Perfect. They're unstoppable. Perfect. So you have to come up with some sort of great way of killing them. Perfect. So again, I love Star Trek. I loved in Discovery where they said previously on Star Trek, and they go back to the cage. It's very few shows in the history of television can go say previously on the episode that you're going to watch, previously on this episode, this is what happens to catch you up, and they go back to the menagerie where you meet Vina, where you meet Pike, where you meet, and they used those scenes and they brought him, and then they went on with the new Pike. I just absolutely adored it. Absolutely. They did it in Doctor Who too. Previously on Doctor Who, and they go right back to episode 1. And then they phased in, and I think it was the 50th anniversary special, and then they phased into now. I love when TV shows do that. I love TV shows when they reference themselves properly. And Star Trek's done a lot of referencing itself not properly. There's 100% complete fan service, which is fine. I mean, I don't, they shouldn't have done that because it's just 100% fan service. Because that brings us back to episode 3-6 and Picard, where there was a ton of fan service. Like, it was a ton of fan service. Oh yeah, so this is my last point before I wrap this up at 49 minutes. And again, I don't want to give too many spoilers for episode 3-6 if you haven't seen it yet. Nemesis was a disappointment. Oh, I didn't mind it. I thought it was a good movie for what it was. It wasn't First Contact. And in the history of those 4 movies, Generations, First Contact, whatever the third one was, Insurrection. What are you gonna do? And Nemesis. First Contact is by far the best one out of all. It's not even close. I mean, Generations is okay for what it is. Insurrection was an episode. It was an episode that they made into a movie. To me, it felt like it was an episode of the original series, original TNG. Nemesis had so much potential. The Romulan War. Had they brought back Sela, I would have loved Nemesis. I would have adored Nemesis because, again, I like when they do that. And it would have been, it would not have been just fan service. It would have been legitimate because Sela, Denise Crosby, when they left her, because she showed up in 3 or 4 episodes, fantastic. Every episode she was in, beautiful. I loved it. I absolutely adored it. And just leading up to it, you hear her voice in the background of that 2-part episode with Spock in it. Loved it. Oh, this is gonna be great. How are they gonna do it? How are they gonna? Hey, that's Denise Crosby's voice. How are they gonna do this? And then you wait. Right, and then she walks out in the very last scene. You never know when they're going to show up, and it's who is this? I loved it because I loved Tasha Yar. I thought she was a fantastic character. I understood Denise's point and why she left the show, just like I understand Will Wheaton's point why he left the show. But I loved it when they came back. so Sela would have been perfect for Nemesis, and I don't know if there's a contract or they didn't bother asking. She would have been awesome in Nemesis because it would have been that redemptive arc. Because in the end, the Romulan commander in Nemesis was on the side of Jean-Luc. I thought that would have been a perfect role for Sela. I think her name was Sela, Tasha Yar's daughter. It would have been perfect, and I would have. It's just like, and I fully get it. Robin Curtis and Kirstie Alley did not want to reprise the role. But Valeris should have been Saavik. And a lot of people say, oh, because that was original. They scratched out Saavik and they put Valeris because Kim Cattrall did not want to play Saavik. And I thought Kim Cattrall was perfect as Valeris. Don't get me wrong. I love Kim Cattrall and almost everything she's ever done. She's Canadian. Tangents upon tangents. James Doohan, Canadian. Shatner, Canadian. Christopher Plummer, Canadian. Kim Cattrall, Canadian. There's 4 Canadians in Star Trek 6. 4, at least. And that's not including the rest of the Canadians in Star Trek 6. But, so anyway, Valeris should have been Saavik, but maybe, and somebody can make a good argument as to glad she wasn't, because Saavik will always be Spock's protege that was living by the book. But anyway, so Star Trek Nemesis has one little special moment for me for the average movie that it was. Above average. I mean, it's a Star Trek movie, so I loved it. But it wasn't as good as First Contact. And it definitely was not as good as Star Trek 6, with all its faults. Nemesis had one huge, I think, just a quick, easy hit. And although I appreciate it more because they didn't take the swing, is that right at the end, when you have the memorial service, if you want to call it, the get together where all the friends talk about Data. And then Riker starts going on about the very first time he met Data. And he says, oh, and what was that? In the movie, he says, oh, and what was that thing? I'm trying to remember what he was whistling. And then me in the theater, it wasn't the Tivoli because the Tivoli is closed by now. But I'm seeing it with a bunch of Trekkies on opening night. You hear sporadic people whistling. And it's like the people in the movie theater made my eyes misty. Like, these are my people. Like, it was one of my most cherished memories of seeing a Star Trek movie. Like, most of my Star Trek movies, all of them, except for probably the motion picture, I saw opening night, and usually with my buddies John and Mark, overall. Now, Star Trek 5 came out, and I was off doing something, and I didn't see it to the late show, and they saw the early show, and they'd never let me live it down. But then again, it was Star Trek 5. so whatever. But we all saw Star Trek 6 together. Back in the day when the Cinesphere at Ontario Place was showing in the winter time, just to keep money coming into Ontario Place. They're showing big blockbuster movies on this big. It's a what do you call those? IMAX. One of the first IMAX screens in the world was the Cinesphere, and they showed Top Gun. They showed The Abyss, which we went and saw. They showed Star Trek 2 and 3, which we went and saw. They showed Aliens, which we did not go see. But anything that was big blockbuster is going to have lots of stuff. So we saw Star Trek 2 and 3. And it was like $9 a ticket. We drove to Toronto and we saw, it wasn't like because I say over the winter. So all those older movies, The Abyss and all that stuff, were playing at the Cinesphere, and we went and saw 3 of them. We saw The Abyss and Star Trek 2 and 3 on a massively huge screen. Now again, because they were not 4K, it wasn't as good as seeing an IMAX movie, but it was pretty close. But anyway, so we are those guys who want to go see Star Trek movies. I think they had Star Wars, like all of them. We didn't bother. Guess Star Wars. We have them VHS. But anyway, so Riker whistles or says, "What was that? What was that tune?" And this is Nemesis now, right? The last movie of TNG. This is the final wrap up. There's never going to be another TNG movie, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's done. Everybody's going to break the sets, go home, blah, blah, blah. Riker says, what was that thing he was whistling in the holodeck when I first met him? And then, as I say, 5 or 6 or maybe 10 people. It was like, I was honestly moved. I thought, these are the people who are like me. Now, there's a lot more passionate, more enthusiastic, more detail-oriented fans out there of Star Trek than I am. Straight up. They have uniforms. I do not. And again, I love them, the fact that they do have the uniforms. That is not my interest in this hobby. But they are those passionate fans that I won't say live and breathe Star Trek, but they have a lot more detailed oriented. I read most of the books up until relatively recently. I've seen every episode that Star Trek's ever put out. I had discussions and blah blah. But these guys they have their news groups and they have the blah blah blah, and they're passionate about the show. And they whistled that during that scene with Riker. And I thought they had missed that, because here's Riker as a musician, right? He should have remembered what Data was whistling, right? So that was been in the back of my head since Nemesis. And how long ago was Nemesis? Since Nemesis. Again, if you don't want spoilers, get out of here. So Star Trek, Picard episode 3, season 6 shows up. And again, people have already ascertained during the final credits, where you see the musical notes in the final credits, that it is Pop Goes the Weasel. Which is... I love people. Again, when I found out Sean Ferrick was mentioned in one of his Star Trek talks, that somebody was playing it, and it's Pop Goes the Weasel. And that was way back in the very first premiere of the episode 1 of season 3. And I'm going, ooh. So I started already thinking about it, because again, I remember to this day, distinctly remember Nemesis and Riker talking about it, that specific song. So boom, Pop Goes the Wheels is going to factor into an episode. And this is going to be great. This is going to be great. And it was great. It was honestly great. And it closed the door for me personally in Nemesis as to what he couldn't remember that song. The character Riker couldn't remember the song Pop Goes the Weasel when he first met Data on the holodeck. And then they showed the frickin' scene. The frickin' scene of the very first episode of Counter Farpoint in episode 3, season 6, of Riker meeting Data for the very first time, and Pop Goes the Weasel. And going, I was misty. Now, again, that's just because my little story arc with Pop Goes the Weasel and Riker and stuff like that. But what really, honest to goodness, hit me in episode 3, because there's a lot of what they call starship porn. The Defiance there, the New Jersey, whatever. You look in the technical manual, the New Jersey wasn't, whatever. Throw it in there to throw an old Constitution class starship. And then the 1701A, my favorite, on any given day. And then you see in the background that they didn't even reference is the NX-01 refit that was supposed to be in season 4 and 5. I caught that. You didn't have to tell me, but everybody told me, because I saw it. I said, "Oh, this is great." And then the Voyager theme starts, and I go, oh, this is just as 7 of 9 talking. I'm getting misty thinking about it. I'm honest right now. I'm getting a little misty, a little teary-eyed. You get Jerry Ryan, who plays Seven. And again, I'm not saying Seven made Voyager so much better after season 4. But she made Voyager so much better. Voyager wasn't bad before Seven showed up. They had some pretty lame episodes, not as lame as Spock's Brain, but they had some pretty lame. And Kes was a nice character. I thought Kes was fine. I didn't mind Kes, but she wasn't a character that I gravitated towards. I loved B'Elanna from episode 1. I loved B'Elanna. B'Elanna Torres was possibly next to... Like, Catherine Janeway was not impressing me the first bunch of episodes. I mean, she seemed to be stark and severe and blah, blah, blah. But B'Elanna, I said, this is going to be the character I'm going to follow through 7 seasons. Like, this is going to be my Scotty character. And I'm going to, because she has quick off the temper of a Klingon, hyper, love, it's fantastic. But, so Kes was, meh, she was there. Neelix, meh, he was there. Right? Paris, great. Kim's great. Tuvok, fantastic. Black Vulcan, fantastic. Chakotay, fine. He was great. The Doc, grating at times, but in the end, now one of my favorite characters. But when Seven showed up in Scorpion, I was like, oh, this is. Sure, you put some supermodel in a skin tight outfit. I get it, but she wasn't just a skin tight model or a model in a skin tight outfit. She was perfect for being a ex-Borg. And anyway, so Seven shows up, and we follow her character arc through 4 seasons, how she became less Borg and more human. She found out Annika and all that stuff, all her whole past and blah, blah, blah. They didn't dwell too much. There was some, I loved the episode Conspiracy with Seven talking about stuff. Like, everything's a conspiracy, and she gets Janeway and Chakotay fighting each other a little bit. I thought that was a brilliant episode for her to conglomerate in her mind who she is now, because she's not Borg and she's not human, and she has to be a hybrid of both and blah, blah, blah. I thought Conspiracy really did a good job on her trying to find her center for who she is now. And when we left Voyager at Finding Earth, again, we can go into the pluses and minuses of their series finale, how short it was compared to what happens now. They never get into it. Paris and B'Elanna have their kid. You hear it on the speakers. They're home. Credits. So it's like, oh, okay. Now again, I'm not, they did it wrong. They did it the way they did it. I admire them for the courage to say, this is what we're going to do, and leave it there, contrary to fan expectation. Because the fan expectation was done at the very first part of the first episode of the season finale, where they got home. And it was a History Channel episode where, Janeway's looking at the history, and then she's old Admiral Janeway, and she goes back. They go get them to get them home better. So we saw Voyager getting home at the beginning of the 2-part episode. So people whining that they didn't get to see Voyager getting home with the celebration, you missed the first part of the first episode. No, yeah, those weren't our characters. Those characters were 16 years older, supposedly. But anyway, we won't go into that. So I'm talking about 7 of 9 now. And so when 7 shows up in Picard, first season, I'm going, oh, I like 7. I like 7. I love Voyager. Like, Voyager, like, I said this before, and it's just my opinion. Voyager's better than DS9. Honest to goodness it is. For me. For Star Trek, Voyager's better than DS9. DS9 was a soap opera. DS9 was a direct, I won't say rip-off, because even JMS doesn't say it's a rip-off, but DS9 was a direct competitor, shall we say, to Babylon 5 at the same time. And Babylon 5, besides the, I don't want to say the word campy acting, that's not what I'm looking for, but the different style of acting than DS9. Babylon 5 was far superior in every facet of writing, of story arc, of maintaining a consistent feel to it. Babylon 5 was so much superior to DS9. It wasn't even close. And so DS9, first of all, to me, didn't feel like Star Trek to begin with. The first episode was great, but as it went along and that did the story arc and the Dominion War, I love the concept. I accept the Dominion War. They started bringing it up in the Next Generation with what's his name, O'Brien's old captain, the guy who was in Shawshank. I can't remember the episode now, where they started, realizing that Cardassians are getting a little sneaky and nefarious. So they started in Ensign Rowe, and Ensign Rowe, who I guess was actually, I don't know if she was actually called to be Major Kira's role. Ensign Rowe was supposed to be, I believe, what I hear rumors, that Michelle Forbes was asked if she wanted to play that character full time on a TV series for 7 seasons, and she turned it down. So went to I can't remember the actress's name. She's fantastic, because I love Kira Nerys. Kira Nerys is my favorite character on DS9. It's not, again, loved her. And I loved her story arcs through the entire thing, and how even when she had, again, too many tangents going on. Anyway, so 7 shows up on Picard. Tangent. 7 shows up in Picard season 1. I'm going, this is great. And then she's not Starfleet anymore. This is great. She's not Starfleet, even though Janeway wanted her to be in Starfleet, and Janeway fought for her to be in Starfleet. And then she joins some resistance, the Rangers, whatever, the Fenris Rangers, whatever they are. And so that was season 1 and 2, with 7 being, reacclimatized to Jean-Luc and Starfleet and blah blah blah. But again, Jean-Luc's not being Starfleet. He's being under the table and doing stuff off the books and trying to get stuff done, blah blah, in season 1 and 2. And then season 3 starts, and she's Starfleet. She's wearing a uniform. She is commander of the Titan, and captain is who the captain is. Fantastic. I love him. And you see how she has been dead named, because she's Commander Hansen now, and she is 7 of 9, and they're giving her previous name before her, for her being who she is, which is 7 of 9, and she accepted that. She's 7. So you see that struggle. That, again, Star Trek for me has always been a colliery or whatever, a reflection of what reality is in our world today. And this is a perfect one with the LGBTQ trans community, which is why I love Star Trek, and they don't hesitate to take this on with 7 as one of the main characters. So that happens, and then we get that very, very poignant, beautiful scene with her and Jack, where Jack agrees with me that the sleek lines of NCC 1701A is the best starship ever. Again, on any given day. And then she pulls up Voyager, and the music starts, and I'm getting a little teary-eyed. And then she goes, "This is where I was reborn. This is where I met my family. This is where blah blah blah." And then she's waxing poetically, and then Jack starts waxing poetic, and she goes, "You really are your father's son." And it's just like, it was honestly, in the entire franchise, that scene just references basically everything about Star Trek that I love. Like every single aspect of the entire franchise of 50 years now, 55 years now, that I love about Star Trek was encompassed in one scene in Picard season 3, episode 6. And then they referenced the whales, they referenced the bounty. The episode's called The Bounty. They have so many Easter eggs in the background. Genesis 2, Kirk's body, Picard's body, attack shrivels for whatever reason. I don't know if that's going to factor into the rest of the series. Data shows up ish. Laura shows up ish. Data's daughter shows up ish. Soon shows up ish. Like, keep on throwing it. You get Easter eggs upon Easter eggs, and yet they are all part of the same plot. They weren't in there just esoterically, as I've been saying, for fan service. I didn't find, besides the Easter eggs in the background, the Genesis 2 and the attack dribbles and the Kirk's body, I did not find the plot Easter eggs to be just in there just for plot Easter eggs. I loved it. I absolutely loved it, and I was just so happy after that episode. I mean, season 3 is just knocking it since the very first episode. Season. I again, I'm one of the few people who actually liked season 1 and 2. They weren't perfect, but they were good, and there was a lot of people griping about it, but it's just like, a lot of people griped about Discovery. I'm sorry, I love Discovery. I thought Discovery from the very first pilot was fantastic. I really liked it. And again, they have like every single, like we come back to Spock's brain. We come back to the bad points about Encounter at Farpoint, and the bad points about the entire first season of TNG. The entire first season. Can you name or think of one episode in TNG, even though it had Tasha Yar in it, and I adore Tasha Yar? Name an episode that stands out as a fantastic Star Trek episode. One in the entire season. There was that episode with the bug creatures. I think it was season 1. From a distant part of the galaxy that were inhabiting people's heads. That was good. I keep on seeing clips of my TikToks now about that specific episode. It was the grossest episode of any Star Trek ever. Guy's head blows up. It's like Cronenberg made this movie. It's like, and that thing comes out of his chest like an alien. That was because you get. Again, this is already an hour now. I get that Roddenberry didn't want conflict because he thinks that Earth solved all their problems, and so therefore the people on the Enterprise should not have any conflict. But you can't have good stories, and nobody, even in a perfect utopia, is going to be happy with each other all the time, Gene. Sorry. So this is why DS9 was better in TNG in that way, and TNG got better when Gene Roddenberry started letting his little string. He got sick, and I feel bad for the guy. Next Generation got better at the end when there was conflict. When Rose showed up, there's conflict, right? There was conflict. There's conflict when O'Brien's there. There's conflict. The original cast didn't have too much conflict, but again, they wrote conflict, and DS9 was all conflict all the time. It was a radical change. Maybe it was too radical for me to appreciate. Voyager had conflict, but it was the Maquis and the Starfleet crew. And I was there for it. But anyway, I've gone on too much, talk about too many tangents about Star Trek and how much I love it. So I'm going to wrap this up. I'm not sure if I'm going to break this up into 2 videos. I don't know if I'm just going to upload the 1 hour, 12 minutes. But it is Saturday night and I'm going to go to bed. So I think I got to say what I wanted to say. The end is Pop Goes the Weasel factors into Picard, which I thought, for me, just closed a chapter that's been niggling in the back of my head all this time since Nemesis. It has been there. Because it's, I will say, because I remember, sorry to get one more quick tangent about Star Trek. I was in college when TNG premiered. I was already 19 or whatever, and maybe 20. I think it's 86 or 87 when Star Trek Next Generation premiered. Doesn't matter. I had lived on Star Trek 79 episodes and a ton of books for that long, that and I was so excited. A lot of people were not excited with TNG starting because none of the original crew could be there. If it's not Kirk and Spock, I'm not going to watch it. That's what they said. Go screw yourself. So I was loving Encounter at Farpoint when it was on TV for the very first time. I loved it. Looking back at it, it was their first kick at the can. It was their first attempt. I know that the characters were not even fleshed out yet. I thought some of the acting, or a lot of the acting, was a little stiff. And it was like a very convoluted episode, and I found out now after listening to Will Wheaton and everybody else talk about it, it was a convoluted episode because Gene wanted to go in one direction and the producers wanted to go another direction, and they kind of hodgepodge 2 episodes together. And I get it, but it had so many good points in it, and one of them was Riker meeting Data on the holodeck. And that one scene stuck with me the entire 7 seasons. It stuck with me through the movies, and it stuck with me right until when Riker was talking about what was that song he was whistling, and that's why that stuck in my head. And now that has been complete. So, because he was doing during the episode season 3, episode 6. What's that song? What do these notes mean? something's niggling in the back of my head. Anyway, that's it. That's all. I hope everybody out there is doing well. I'm sorry I went off into so many Star Trek tangents here, but it's not 2.5 hours, so that's a blessing. I will talk to everybody soon, and stay safe. Take care of yourself first. Take care of whoever else you need to take care of. Remember, family is not just blood relatives, but family is people that you have that are family, and I have lots of people like that, which is very nice. So I will talk to you soon.